Whether or not you like his work, or you even consider it artwork, you probably associate a mess of splattered paint with the name Jackson Pollock. Anyone with a toddler has probably experienced something similar, but the work that Pollock created was uniquely his. It was bold, fresh, and daring. It also went against everything that was considered art at the time. Jackson Pollock, the artist best known for paintings like Number 5, Number 11, Mural, and Number 1. He wasn't so great with titles, but his work was iconic and divisive. The drip paintings that he is best known for are chaotic.
Not deliberate, not random, someplace in between.
And this is the reason Pollock is a household name.
Jackson Pollock.
Jackson Pollock.
Jackson Pollock.
He was a leader in the Abstract Expressionism movement, a movement that shifted the global focus of art from Europe to New York City. What is Abstract Expressionism? Well, the term was developed by American painters in the 1940s and 50s. They would often use large-scale canvases and unconventional art supplies. They focused more on color and action than detailed brushstrokes and clear subject matter. Abstract Expressionism refers to the color field paintings by artists like Mark Rothko and Barnett Newman, as well as the action paintings by Willem de Kooning and Pollock. Many artists in the movement were influenced by the Surrealism era that came before it, and other similar European art styles of the time. But let's shift focus back to Jackson Pollock. Born in Cody, Wyoming in 1912, Jackson was the youngest of 5 brothers. After only 10 months in Cody, his family moved throughout the Southwest to California and Arizona. His father worked as a land surveyor and likely fueled his love of the outdoors. His mother took care of the children and supported all of their artistic pursuits. Brothers Charles and Sanford would start their careers in painting before Jackson. Despite his interest in the arts, his family would later tell reporters that Jackson had never created anything in his early years, likely being intimidated by his oldest brother Charles, the OG artist of the family. The Pollock family would move around repeatedly between California and Arizona, moving 9 times throughout Jackson's childhood. In 1927, he joined the ROTC program, and despite being only 15 years old, he started to drink heavily, later being expelled from the ROTC program for punching a student while drunk. Alcoholism would continue to be an issue throughout Pollock's lifetime. In 1928, the family moved to Los Angeles, where Pollock enrolled in the Manual Arts High School. It's here that he discovered his passion for art, and would take a particular interest in abstract art. Studying under Frederick John Schwankovsky, Pollock learned traditional drawing and painting techniques. Always wanting to be more expressive with his work, Pollock found traditional methods to be boring. He spent much of his time focusing on a vision instead of things like anatomy or form. At age 18, Pollock left Los Angeles for New York City, where he lived with his brother Charles and began studying with regionalist painter Thomas Hart Benton at the Art Students League. Throughout the 1930s, Pollock lived with his brothers Charles and Sanford in New York. During this time, Pollock studied mural painting, a style that would later influence the scale of his work. He observed the work of Mexican muralists Jose Clement Orozco and Diego Rivera. Later, he joined an experimental workshop by David Siqueiros, who used household paints and experimental techniques in his work. From 1935 to 1942, Pollock worked for the Works Progress Administration Federal Art Project, a program that was started to jumpstart the economy during the Great Depression. Work from this period reflected themes of Pollock's childhood in Cody. His continued drinking resulted in psychiatric treatment in 1937, and a stay in the hospital the following year after being briefly terminated from the Federal Art Project. In 1939, Pollock saw Pablo Picasso's exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art, a show that inspired him to try new techniques and push the limits of his work. In 1942, art collector Peggy Guggenheim opened her art gallery in New York City. At this point, Pollock had started experimenting with pouring paint onto his canvases in paintings like Male and Female and Composition with Pouring 1. The following year, after hearing reactions to his work, Guggenheim would give Pollock a contract paying $150 per month, which allowed him to focus all of his energy on painting.
Thank you very much, young man.
He was commissioned by Guggenheim to paint a mural for her Manhattan townhouse. The painting, named Mural, was his first large-scale painting. He was still using a paintbrush at the time, but experimented with paint splattering and the use of household paint. Guardians of the Secret was painted the same year. It's heavily inspired by Native American sand painting, something that Pollock had early memories of growing up in the West. In 1941, Pollock met contemporary artist Lee Krasner, who would become an important influence on his life and legacy. Krasner helped to promote and manage Pollock's work. The two were married in 1945, and shortly after bought a house in Springs on Long Island. The house was isolated but surrounded by natural beauty that would inspire Pollock. It featured a large barn that was later converted into a studio, where much of Pollock's later work was made. 1947 would mark the beginning of Pollock's iconic style, the drip technique. Named after the technique of dripping, flicking, and pouring paint on a canvas, rather than carefully applying it with a paintbrush. He used hardened brushes, sticks, and even basting syringes to apply the paint. His painting Full Fathom 5 started off with brushstrokes and a palette knife, but Pollock laid the painting on the ground and poured paint directly onto the surface. This technique is described as the all-over style, where he would walk around the painting and approach it from all sides. Pollock used his whole body to paint with energy and let his movements shape the artwork. Despite what seems like chaos, he usually had an idea of what his work would look like. He controlled how paint was applied and wouldn't stop working until he saw what he wanted. In 1949, Pollock was featured in Life magazine alongside some of his most iconic drip paintings. The article would bring unwanted fame and criticism, as it asked the question, is he the greatest living painter in the United States? Shortly after the article in Life magazine, a photographer named Hans Nemeth arranged to take photos of Pollock in his studio. After witnessing a painting in progress, Nemeth realized that filming Pollock was the only way to do his action paintings justice. He began filming a documentary, and filmed Pollock working on several different paintings, including one that was painted on glass.
I was born in Cody, Wyoming, 39 years ago. I don't work from drawings or color sketches. My painting is direct. I usually paint on the floor. I enjoy working on a large canvas. Having the canvas on the floor, I feel nearer, more a part of the painting.
As part of the filming process, Nemeth would direct Pollock's painting, having him start and stop on command. Pollock grew more and more annoyed at this process. At the time, Pollock had been sober for 2 years, but after a particularly stressful day with Nemeth, Pollock poured himself a glass of bourbon. This resulted in a heated argument between Pollock and Nemeth, where the two called each other a phony. Their time together ended after the argument, and Pollock never stopped drinking after that point. His work also shifted tone around this time. With the newly found fame, Pollock questioned his own work. His health was declining due to his continued drinking, and he started to avoid using color in his work. A series of paintings around this time are painted using only black paint. They appear to show distorted faces and shapes, telling a story of Pollock's own struggle at the time. These are known as the black paintings. Briefly returning to color, Pollock painted one of his most famous paintings with number 11, or Blue Poles as it was later named. Shoe prints and pieces of glass can be found on the canvas, capturing his actions and bringing himself into the painting. The distinct blue lines separate it from other similar paintings and act as a vague focal point. The Deep in 1953 used a buildup of white brushstrokes on top of a black surface. The painting is a reflection of Pollock's mood at the time, which was heavily influenced by his alcohol use. Pollock had stopped painting entirely by 1955, still depressed and drinking heavily. Krasner had gone to Europe to reevaluate their marriage. During this time, Pollock had an affair with Ruth Kligman, a 25-year-old artist who he had met at a local bar. In August of 1956, Pollock was out driving drunk with Kligman and her friend Edith Metzer when he lost control of his convertible. Pollock and Metzer were killed, while Kligman survived, having serious injuries. After Pollock's death, Lee Krasner managed his estate and the sale of his paintings. Krasner would continue to paint up until her death in 1984. Although Pollock had stopped painting at the time of his death, there will always be speculation as to the work he would have created if his life hadn't ended so soon. His black and white paintings suggest a return to abstract forms, something he struggled with after the infamous, career-defining drip paintings. During his lifetime, his paintings sold for thousands of dollars. Today, they sell for hundreds of millions. And no matter what your thoughts are on Pollock's work, his impact on the art world is huge and lasting. Today, he is considered one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. What are your thoughts on Pollock's work? Do you think his fame is deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please consider liking, subscribing, and clicking the bell.